In the stillness of the afternoon, my daughter's phone ringtone shattered the quiet. The phone was carelessly placed within my reach. Looking at the screen, a clear image of my husband's name and picture was displayed. "Emma, it's a call from Dad. I wonder what he wants?" With a slightly flustered look, Emma replied.
"I'm a bit busy right now. Can you put it on speaker?"
Heeding Emma's request, I quickly activated the speaker mode. Instantly, my husband's voice filled the room.
Hey, how's everything over there? How's your mom doing?
Yeah, she just woke up.
Really? Is she fully awake now?
My husband's voice clearly contained a mix of surprise and excitement. I had no idea what they were talking about. However, I could sense that the topic of their conversation was something significant. Internally shaken, I listened closely. I spend my days as a full-time housewife, protecting our home. Our family life with Mike, myself, and our growing daughter, Emma, was generally peaceful. I met Mike several years ago through a mutual acquaintance by chance. I was increasingly drawn to his sincere and straightforward personality, and our relationship deepened, eventually leading to marriage.
Lisa, thank you for taking care of our home every day. Since it's a holiday, why don't we go somewhere special next time?
That sounds lovely. How about we visit that popular hot spring destination everyone's talking about?
That famous hot spring place? It's been a long time since we last visited a spa. Considering how tired you must be from daily chores and raising Emma, it sounds like a perfect way to refresh.
Mike and I cherished our time together as a couple. On our days off, we often visited nearby tourist attractions and hot springs. After Emma was born, our holidays involved going to places she'd enjoy, like theme parks or zoos. However, about 15 years into our marriage, the dynamics between us began to change. The warmth and understanding we once shared faded, especially noticeable in Mike's behavior. The dinners I painstakingly prepared often went untouched, as Mike would dine out and come home late. "Mike, you had dinner out again? It would help if you could let me know in advance. I made your favorite dish."
Why are you always nagging? Who do you think works outside all day? Isn't it your job to take care of the house?
Lately, Mike would get easily irritated and raise his voice whenever I pointed something out. Mike had built a successful career in a civil engineering company. His physique and assertiveness were well known at work. It was no different at home. However, lately, he's been quick to anger. More often than not, that anger was directed at me. Our early days, filled with mutual affection, seemed a world away. Many saw us as the perfect couple. I've often contemplated escaping this life with him. But our beloved daughter, born out of our union, keeps me anchored here. His demeanor changed dramatically about 3 years ago. Before that, Mike was an understanding husband, always cherishing me.
I'm home. What's for dinner?
"Welcome home. I'm still cooking. Just wait a little."
What are you talking about? Isn't it dinner time? This is the problem with stay-at-home moms. I'll go eat out.
"Just wait a little longer. I'm almost done. I know it's dinner time."
Isn't it expected for dinner to be ready by the time I get home? Why can't you manage such a basic task? Never mind, I'll go out to eat.
Wait a moment. At first, he was just mildly displeased when dinner was not ready on time. But it gradually turned into him venting his stress through verbal and physical abuse. He began to strike in places where the injuries wouldn't show, making the pain even more intense. Mike I once loved gradually became a stranger. This year, our daughter started her 9th grade. She is contemplating her choices for high school. Aiming for high academic goals, she often comes home late. This is due to study sessions with friends and after-school classes. Despite the strained relationship between us, we pretend to be a happy couple. So she remains oblivious to the occasional rough treatment I endure. While he always acts like the ideal father in front of her, our growing daughter, with her strengthening individuality, doesn't seem too interested in his behavior. She has a habit of having dinner even when she returns late. She always reports to me if she's dining out with friends. One evening, while my husband was relaxing in the bath, our daughter came home.
"I'm back. It was a long day, but I'm super hungry."
"Welcome back, Emma. Since you were a bit late, I prepared a light meal."
"You always look out for me, Mom." "Oh, did Dad skip dinner and go out again?"
"Yes, it seems he had something outside."
"Dad's been doing that a lot recently, hasn't he? If he just let us know, we wouldn't have to wait."
"I know, right? But Emma, you must be tired from studying hard every day, right?"
"Yeah, but I'm working towards my goals, so I'm still energetic. It's just a bit disappointing to see so much food left over. We could have reused it for school lunch."
"It's okay, Emma. Don't worry about it.
But Mom, your cooking is so delicious. It's such a waste for Dad to eat out all the time.
When Emma finished her meal, she took a relaxing bath and then quietly returned to her room. During this period, she's been focused on studying for her college entrance exams. I can consider divorce later. For now, I prioritize building a peaceful home, even if the relationship with my husband is cooling off. What's even more distressing is that he often takes our daughter to visit his parents' house on weekends. His parents' house is just a few minutes away, an easy place to visit. Currently, his mother lives there alone, and he's very close to her, so he visits her frequently on weekends. And he takes our daughter with him. I've been there a few times in the past, and each time his mother has been rather cold to me.
Lisa, can you go shopping for me? Soy sauce, oil, rice, and maybe some tasty drinks. But do it on a bicycle, not the car. That's a small task you can manage, right?
From my past experiences, she often makes me run errands in the most inconvenient ways, like forcing me to shop by bicycle. On important occasions or family events, she would deliberately exclude me, like not preparing food for me. That's why I started avoiding visits there.
Let's spend family time at my parents' place again this week.
But I don't want to be insulted by your mother again.
What are you talking about? If you behave properly, there won't be any issues, right?
Why don't you consider my feelings or perspective?
This is so bothersome. Fine, you don't have to come anymore.
Over time, my husband's attitude changed, and he stopped asking me to accompany him. However, he started taking our daughter with him. Despite her busy study schedule for advancing her education, the daughter hesitated to decline, but the husband persistently refused to listen and took her with him. When the husband returns from his in-laws' home, he is in a good mood and they can spend a peaceful evening. However, the biggest concern is the daughter's changed demeanor. Recently, when the daughter returns from her in-laws' home, she clearly appears to be depressed and she's been spending more time locked in her room. It's obvious the mother-in-law deeply loves the daughter, so it was hard to believe she would receive the same kind of unpleasant treatment that I had experienced in the past. Late at night, when the house was wrapped in silence, the daughter quietly came out of her room. Her eyes were red with tears, and she had a sad look on her face.
Mom, I actually...
What's wrong, Emma? Is something bothering you?
Well, but it's late, and I have school tomorrow, so I'm going to bed.
All right, dear. Remember, you can always talk to me. Get some rest. It seemed like she was about to share something significant, but perhaps she felt it was too soon. She didn't open up in the end. Whatever was on her mind remained a mystery to me. On a subsequent weekend, the husband announced another visit to his parents' home and declared he would be taking the daughter.
All right, get ready. We're heading to my parents' house again today.
Okay, Mom, I'll be back later.
I wondered if there was a reason why the daughter no longer resisted visiting the in-laws. They were supposed to be back by evening, so I decided to head to the nearby grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner. What should I cook tonight? Maybe a tofu burger would be healthy and the family would like it. I thought as I opted to take the bus because Mike had taken the car. While waiting at the bus stop, a sudden intense headache struck me. Oh, this intense pain. Could there be days this bad? I thought. Just then, I blacked out from the pain. My head again today. It's even worse than before. This pain isn't normal. For the past few weeks, I have been experiencing these headaches. Initially, they were mild and somewhat disruptive, but they grew stronger with each passing day. Usually, an over-the-counter painkiller would suffice, but the pain this time was beyond bearable. Just as I thought, what is this pain? I passed out on the street. When I came to, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, covered in white sheets. A kind passerby noticed me and immediately called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. After a while, the doctor came into the room and informed me they couldn't yet determine the clear cause of the headache. They said I needed to be admitted for further tests and a detailed diagnosis. While we were discussing this, my daughter, Emma, with a worried look on her face, knocked and entered the room.
Mom, are you okay? I got a call from the hospital and rushed over.
I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't mean to worry you like this. But where's your dad?
Dad seems to be busy right now and can't come, so I came by myself.
Oh, I see. Thank you. The doctor says I need to be hospitalized for a while.
I spoke to the doctor too. Don't worry, Mom. I think you're just tired and not feeling well. Make sure you rest well.
Thank you, Emma. That's reassuring. Even though I was lying in a hospital bed, my husband didn't seem to care. He didn't visit or even call. Does he really not care about me in this situation? Filled with disappointment, Emma entered the room holding a colorful assortment of fruits.
I already got permission from the nurse to bring this in. I thought maybe eating some fruit would help lift your spirits. Shall we eat some together?
Thank you, Emma. You're so thoughtful even now. She nodded and began to neatly slice the fruits onto a plate. While she was doing that, Emma's phone vibrated and rang. When I saw the screen, my husband's name appeared. Emma, it looks like it's a call from your dad.
Oh, sorry. Can you answer it on speaker while I wash my hands?
Complying with her request, I turned on the speaker mode. My husband's voice clearly echoed in the room.
Emma, can you hear me? How's your mom doing?
She just woke up a little while ago.
Really? Is she conscious now?
I could hear the surprise in my husband's voice. I felt like there was a secret between my husband and daughter, and my heart raced. Emma paused for a moment and started searching for something in her bag.
I can't believe it, that Lisa's conscious now. Why?
Mike, what's going on with your wife? Did something go wrong?
I heard a concerned voice from my mother-in-law in the background.
Lisa seems to have regained consciousness. It's really strange. I should have added more drugs.
More drugs? What did they do?
Did you properly mix the dog medicine into her drink?
Of course. I've been increasing the amount little by little so she wouldn't notice. But this time, even though I added more, it doesn't seem to have any effect.
Dog medicine? What are they talking about?
Indeed, I've heard that medicine affects humans too. Maybe it's not strong enough on its own. Maybe next time I should try the sleeping pills I was prescribed at the psychiatrist's.
That sounds like a good idea. I'll try that medicine next time.
I can't believe what they're saying.
If this plan works, we can claim her life insurance too.
Right, she's been a nuisance for a long time. They want to get rid of her soon.
Exactly. I think this is the perfect scheme.
And the next steps are already going according to plan.
What next steps? As if forgetting I was there, the two continued their conversation.
If she's gone, a new marriage path will open up. My next emotional outlet target would probably be Emma.
Initially, when you said you'd raise her in our home, I never imagined, but we need her for our emotional release too.
Don't worry, Emma has been properly trained under me.
That's true. At first, she was resistant and rebellious against us, but now she follows our orders.
Exactly. But Emma, you can't tell your mother about this. If you do, you know the consequences. If there's any change in her condition, contact me immediately. See you later.
The sound of the phone hanging up resonated, and I stood there in shock, unable to process the shocking truth. Next to me, my daughter carefully put away the items she had taken out during the call.
Mom, I'm sorry it's come to this, but I'm going to tell you everything now. Please listen.
My daughter took a deep breath and began to explain everything. Mike had been having an affair with another woman, and it had been going on for over 3 years. Even more surprisingly, mother-in-law knew about it, and whenever Mike visited mother-in-law's house, that woman would visit at the same time. The reason my daughter was left with mother-in-law was not only for Mike to gain custody, but there was more. After I was gone, it seemed Mike was training our daughter in a specific way to be a target for him, to release his stress and anger. One day, when my daughter stepped out of the shower and removed her clothes, numerous bruises and scars became evident on her body. My husband's actions were cruel, but surprisingly, even my mother-in-law and my husband's mistress had a dismissive attitude towards my daughter, and they constantly made unfounded accusations and slandered me. At first, my daughter resisted their behavior. However, my husband threatened her, saying that if she defied them, I would pay the price. Therefore, considering my safety, she remained silent and didn't tell me anything. Once, during a visit to my in-laws, she accidentally overheard my husband and mother-in-law planning to kill me. My husband's plot was clever. He planned to initially mix dog medication into my food little by little, and then gradually increase the amount. Armed with this shocking information, my daughter continued her daily investigation to uncover the truth and gather evidence. Then, one day, when they heard I was rapidly deteriorating, they seemed to welcome the news. They instructed my daughter to check on my condition. At that time, she cleverly allowed me to overhear the conversation through a speaker, and as they began to speak, she discreetly recorded their entire conversation using a device from her bag.
Mom, I feel guilty for not telling you the truth up to now. It must be hard to find out such shocking truths all of a sudden, but with this, we can proceed with the divorce and custody will be guaranteed, right?
Emma, there's something I haven't told you either. While you were at school or when it was just the two of us, he often became violent towards me. I'm sorry for hiding such a fact.
Then we both had painful secrets. But now, we have to stand up to them.
Just think about it. If they are arrested and charged, you might be viewed as the child of a criminal. Are you sure you're okay with that?
Mom, I'm not afraid of that. I have evidence that I'm a victim of violence, and I have friends who believe in me. Plus, I don't plan to use Dad's last name. I intend to start a new life with your maiden name.
I'm relieved to know you've thought so much about it. Let's confront them together. After that, we took swift action. We contacted a lawyer and then informed the police about everything. A few hours later, the police, lawyers, and doctors who arrived at the scene explained the circumstances and background in detail. After thorough police investigations, heart medication for dogs was discovered at the in-laws' residence, and related internet purchase records also came to light. As a result, my mother-in-law, husband, and the woman he had an affair with were arrested on charges of attempted murder. According to their statements, my husband had taken out a hefty life insurance policy on me. It seems their plan was to enjoy a luxurious life with insurance money after getting rid of me from this world. It's believed that behind their intentions to gain custody of my daughter was not just for stress relief but also to make her take care of all household chores. Moreover, if they were ever to divorce me, they might have strongly desired custody to avoid paying child support. When I received a detailed explanation from the police, I was filled with anger towards their cold and irrational plans. Taking someone's life, no matter the reason, is inexcusable. The mother-in-law and husband's mistress, who participated in this heinous plan, can also be said to have acted immorally. Later on, there was a chance my daughter would be labeled as a criminal's child, but she took it surprisingly calmly. I quickly initiated divorce procedures from my husband, and my daughter and I decided to revert to my maiden name. While changing schools was an option, after explaining the situation to school officials and classmates, my daughter was able to continue her daily life without facing bullying or harassment. Her passion for her studies remained unchanged, and I was thrilled when she passed the entrance exam for the nursing school she had long dreamed of. Since the school was near my childhood home, we started a new life there after her high school graduation. When my husband and the others are eventually released after serving their sentences, I plan to claim damages with the help of a lawyer. After several weeks of treatment and rehab, my health significantly improved, and I finally left the hospital. My current daily life consists of spending time writing essays and blogging about novels at home. By writing about the harsh treatment and emotional pain I received from my husband and mother-in-law, I might be attempting to process and slowly move forward from past events. Writing brings back memories of past pain and suffering. At those moments, past events occasionally flash back in my mind. However, now, living with my daughter at my childhood home, we are without any fears. Compared to previous days, my current life is incredibly peaceful, and I can genuinely enjoy every day. The memories of those painful days are gradually fading, and I believe the day those memories disappear completely will come. I feel ready to welcome a new chapter in my life when that time arrives.
Hey, show me where you work. I was startled and unconsciously glanced at her face. With her typical condescending and conceited demeanor, Lauren, with whom I had reconnected during our reunion after 18 years, was making an outrageous demand. Why? I hesitantly inquired as to why. During her argument, she abruptly altered her tone and started emphasizing her points. I want to see with my own eyes what kind of lowly company a high school dropout like you works at. In an attempt to stop her hysterical outbursts, I reluctantly took her to a certain company. But the location was nothing like the humble office she had envisioned. It was a large publicly traded company. In addition, her husband, Kevin, whom she constantly boasted about, showed up for the meeting. Why are you here? Jason is my name. What is the new rock like? Are you fond of it? As I gazed into the aquarium, I spoke to my pet turtle, Buddy, whom I love very much. As the saying goes, turtles live 10,000 years, cranes live 1,000 years. With an average lifespan of almost 40 years, green turtles actually outlive other creatures. As I began to grow tired of living alone, I had the sudden impulse to adopt a pet and went to a local pet store. But for some reason, I didn't like any of the cats or dogs in the exhibit. Taking care of a live thing entails responsibilities, of course. I was undecided that day and left the store without deciding because I had never owned a dog or cat before. But when I came home, the thoughts persisted. Later, when I went back to the store, I noticed a sign that said, "Green turtles now in stock." Excuse me? What's this? A young woman employee in the area directed me to a tank with multiple green turtles swimming in it when I questioned her. I was totally enthralled by their big eyes, jet black bodies, and dark green shells. I observed their attempts to use their sharp claws to scale the rocks, and before I knew it, I had brought a green turtle and all the supplies needed for turtle care home. 3 years have passed since then. At least I'll be with this little guy for another 37 years. I had to go to work after setting the food timer and verifying the water's temperature and oxygen content. I ride a road bike instead of taking the train. In addition to being a pastime, it helps me lose the belly fat that began to annoy me once I turned 30. I've always valued the morning hours the most in my day, even before the craze for morning activities gained popularity. People's ability to focus and think clearly is considered to be at its best in the morning. Spending more than an hour riding my road cycle down Central Street in New York helps me decompress and may even inspire ideas for the next product. Actually, I had an idea for our flagship product, the Micro Proman projector, while I was stuck at a traffic signal on my way to work. The sweet scent of coffee wafts through the air. It's that time of the year again. The weekend is likely to be perfect for outings. If the weather is good, I'll take Buddy for a walk in the nearby park. Lost in these pleasant thoughts, I was suddenly approached by a woman waiting to cross the street. "Hey, Jason." Turning around, I saw Lauren, a classmate from middle school, pointing at me in surprise. Lauren, who was one of the most beautiful girls in our class, if not our entire grade, still had a stunning, eye-catching beauty, now enhanced by the subtle allure of being 33 years old. She seemed aware she belonged in the bustling streets of New York. It's funny. What, are you a delivery guy? I couldn't quite grasp what she found amusing, but I assumed she meant, it's funny running into you here, interpreting it in my own way. She seemed to have mistaken me pedaling my road bike for a delivery rider. Sort of. What about you, Lauren? She flashed an unnaturally white smile. I have a photo shoot this morning, but more importantly, you're going to the reunion this weekend, right? Oh, right. I completely forgot about that. I remembered a postcard I had left at the entrance of my house. This weekend marks the 18-year reunion of my middle school class. The venue, if I recall correctly, is an Italian restaurant in Somerville. I'm planning to attend. As the traffic light looked like it was about to change, I replied briefly, "Make sure you come." She said in her usual high-handed manner, "Make sure you come." She hadn't changed a bit from those days. A stunning beauty with a flawless face and figure, but honestly not my type. I had seen many of my male friends in middle school get heartbroken by Lauren. Some were bluntly rejected and completely crushed, while others thought they were in a relationship with her, only to find out they were just being strung along. Who knows how many guys cried over her misleading behavior and cunningness. Of course, it wasn't just the boys. There were numerous couples who broke up simply because the boy had fallen for Lauren. Middle schoolers are in the sensitive period of adolescence. Once a conflict between boys and girls starts, rumors spread quickly in the confined school environment. Some girls were openly hostile towards Lauren, but she just ignored them as if nothing mattered. At the young age of 15, her audacity and brazenness were unparalleled, almost commanding respect. She carried herself as if the world revolved around her, a divine air to her demeanor. With her beauty and calculated behavior, she was like a bewitching witch at the top of the school hierarchy, manipulating those around her at will. On the other hand, back then, I was just an average middle school boy, more interested in club activities and video games than dating girls. The only thing notable about me was that my voice broke a little earlier than my friends. I wanted no part in the drama surrounding Lauren and her clique, nor did I want anyone taking away my precious gaming time. I was just a typical adolescent, perhaps even less mature for my age, while Lauren was a sophisticated middle schooler, years ahead of her time. I've always believed that I have a knack for sensing these kinds of things since I was young. Lauren was definitely one of those people. Her dazzling brilliance was beautiful from a distance, but get too close and you're likely to get burned. This unexpected morning encounter with Lauren made me reflect on my middle school days. As I pedaled on my road bike, arriving at work slightly sweaty, I finally settled into my day. As soon as I sat at my desk, I opened my computer. Our company has advanced in paperless operations, so everything from confidential contracts to personal receipts is stored electronically. At first glance, one might think there's no work left without physical documents, but once I'd opened my personal shared folder, a plethora of unreviewed documents awaited me. I let out a sigh and checked my schedule on Outlook. 5 mandatory meetings today and over 45 unread emails. I prioritized my tasks before diving into the material for the first meeting. Days like this fly by in a blink. Sometimes, it's important to take a moment to reflect on oneself. In that sense, the reunion might be a good opportunity. Finally, after finishing my work for the day, I left the office. On my way home, intoxicated by the even sweeter scent of osmanthus, I rushed back on my road bike. Upon arriving home, I found Buddy in the same position as when I left, leisurely yawning on his new rock formation. Then came the weekend. The reunion was set for the evening, so I had planned to take Buddy to the park during the day. But unfortunately, it was rainy. With no other choice, I tossed the pile of laundry into the washing machine and pressed the start button on its automatic dry cycle. Immediately, the drum of the washer began to whirl. Watching it spin, my thoughts also began to whirl, taking me back to my middle school days. That was the day of our graduation ceremony. By chance, as I walked down the corridor, I overheard Lauren talking with a friend. "What's with him? He's so annoying." "The worst, really," she said in a petulant tone. "Calm down. There's no guy who wouldn't be swayed by Lauren," her friend consoled her, trying to reassure her. Honestly, I was more surprised to hear that there were guys she couldn't charm. It wasn't eavesdropping, but I couldn't help overhearing. I decided to keep this fact to myself without telling anyone. After the graduation ceremony, almost everyone in our grade went on to either public or private high schools, with just one exception. I was heavily into the computer class I was attending as an extracurricular activity at the time and decided to forego high school to pursue programming more seriously. I convinced my parents to let me immerse myself in a free school. Luckily, my parents were very open-minded and laid-back people. "How about you attend a famous computer school in New York instead? Is that a sports thing? What if Jason becomes a world champion or something? If you're going to be on TV, Mom has to start losing weight now." That was how casual my parents were, mixing computers, programming, and esports. Normally, if one parent is lenient, the other tends to be strict, but both of my parents were optimistic. Perhaps because they had me at a young age, they saw me not going to high school as a humorous son trying to accomplish something different and unconventional. So when I told them I didn't want to go to school and just explained what I wanted to do, there was no conflict with them at all. At the same time, I was surprised and somewhat worried about their too lenient educational stance. But thanks to that, I am who I am today. Eventually, I passed the entrance exam for a renowned programming school in Chino Hills, California, which my father found for me. I spent 2 years there mastering programming skills. Armed with these skills, I started my job hunt, but I encountered an unexpected problem. The career counselor at the job center frowned upon seeing my resume and said, "Programming School H. This doesn't give you a high school diploma, so your highest education is middle school." Sadly, that was exactly the case. One reason my parents didn't object to the programming school was that if I passed the selection test, the tuition would be almost free, making the educational expenses significantly lower than going to high school. We weren't extremely poor, but we were a low-middle-class family. Both of my parents were from rural areas and had no savings since they had me at a young age. Afterward, I was rejected by every IT-related company I applied to through the employment office, and dark clouds started looming over my life. But being the son of those parents, I maintained some optimism. If I can't get hired, leaving the job center, I headed straight to the tax office. Hey, Chasen over here. At the reunion, as I wandered around the large venue with a beer in hand, my best friend, Mark, spotted me and beckoned me over. You didn't come last time, right? Good. You could make it. I had completely forgotten, but there was a reunion when we were 25. I think I missed it due to the flu or something. Actually, I ran into Lauren yesterday by chance. Hearing that, Mark was surprised. Wow, Lauren's a super popular model now. We were in the same high school, you know. She was already doing reader modeling and appearing in magazines back then. Look, that crowd over there is definitely around Lauren. Mark pointed across the room while holding his beer. Looking where he pointed, there was indeed a crowd, and Lauren was at the center. As expected, she radiated the aura of a leading lady, as if the reunion was held just for her. Noticing our gaze, Lauren smiled brightly while gently dismissing the classmates talking to her with a wave of her hand. She confidently walked over to us, unaffected by her slender high heels. So, you were already here. Long time no see, she said. Mark seemed flustered when Lauren suddenly looked his way. Oh yeah, you're still as beautiful as ever. I had forgotten, but Mark did have a crush on Lauren. Back then, he was too shy to confess his feelings. Unlike the other boys, if I remember correctly, the number of times he initiated a conversation with her could be counted on one hand. After we exchanged brief greetings, Lauren ostentatiously showed off her left ring finger. The ring was adorned with what appeared to be a large, sparkling diamond. I actually got married, Lauren said. We were both 33 years old. Somewhere in my heart, I had thought that Lauren might never marry. Really? That's great. Congratulations. The old Mark probably would have hidden away and sulked after hearing that. It's only natural that he's grown up, and I found myself oddly impressed, almost like a parent would be. I'm going to grab some food, Mark muttered. Maybe he still hadn't fully matured. Unable to endure the situation any longer, he left us to head toward the catering area. My husband works at Microtech Inn, Lauren boasted. Microtech Corporation is a recently listed company gaining so much attention that it was even featured in the financial magazine's quarterly reports. So that's where Lauren's husband works. What kind of work does he do? Which department? Lauren seemed taken aback, not expecting me to inquire so deeply about her husband. She paused, looking like a pigeon shot with a pellet gun, but soon raised her chin and bragged confidently. He's involved in creating the Micro Pro. I think it's the product development division. He's a manager, so he's on the fast track to success. Hearing this, something clicked in my mind. A certain person came to mind. Suddenly, the MC jumped onto the makeshift stage at the front of the venue and grabbed the microphone. Okay, let's start the much-awaited bingo game. Please get your bingo cards ready, which were distributed at the reception. And yes, we have prizes. Someone whistled loudly, amping up the excitement in the room. From somewhere, a long table on casters was wheeled in from the back. On top of the table were what appeared to be prizes: home appliances, gaming consoles, theme park tickets, and branded wallets. The lineup was surprisingly luxurious for a mere reunion event. No wonder the participation fee was high. The invitation card had mentioned that an Italian restaurant in Somerville was rented out for the event. Even considering the venue cost, a participation fee of $100 seemed like a ripoff, but seeing the prizes, it felt somewhat justified. The venue lights dimmed for the bingo game, spotlighting the host on stage. I later learned that one of the organizing members worked in stage technology, so the professional lighting was borrowed for free from their workplace. "The first number is 24, announced the DJ, holding up a small ball with a number. Another organizer quickly wrote 24 on a whiteboard set up nearby. With the audience lights dimmed, the only way to see the faces of those around us was by the light spilling from the stage. Lauren, still next to me, whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Hey, how about we make a bet?" I turned to her, puzzled. Her gaze remained fixed on the DJ on the stage. "Whoever gets bingo first wins." I couldn't understand why she was challenging me to such a childish game. "If I'd win, show me where you work." Her sudden demand caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. "The next number is 81, she continued. "Maybe we'll see some reaches soon." The entire venue was getting into the spirit. Soon, someone nearby shouted, "Bingo." Lauren then suddenly turned to face me. Although her face was hard to see due to the stage lights, her eyes were cold and sharper than I'd ever seen. "I want to see where a high school dropout like you works." For a moment, the air between us turned icy. What's her deal? I never liked Lauren, not even back in middle school, and we weren't particularly close. If anything, I had kept my distance to avoid trouble. Yet now, for some reason, she seemed intent on involving me. Soon after, someone finally yelled, "Bingo." The venue erupted in applause. The lights suddenly brightened, allowing us to finally see each other clearly. "Prizes are going fast, everyone. The next number is 7. Hearing this, Lauren smirked. "Lucky number 7. I win. Remember our bet." She left me standing there in surprise and promptly went forward to claim her prize. "Ah, there you are. Couldn't see you in the dark?" Mark, who had disappeared earlier, found me and started chatting again. He offered me a plate overflowing with salad and fried chicken, insisting I eat. I debated whether to tell my best friend about my recent interaction with Lauren, but in the end, I decided not to tell anyone. The 18-year reunion came to a close without further incident. The prizes were all gone, and my bingo card remained without a win, reduced to just a piece of paper. "Thanks for keeping your promise. See you today." Lauren messaged me on a messaging app within a week of the reunion. I wondered who told her my account, but decided not to look into it. I wasn't too keen on it, but a promise is a promise. I arranged to meet her in front of a certain company. "Hey, this is my husband's company," she realized as soon as we arrived. Indeed, as she said, we were standing in front of Microtech Corporation. "I told you I want to see where you work." Her tone was noticeably more forceful than before. To avoid further upsetting her, I silently followed Lauren into the lobby of Microtech Corporation, and together we approached the reception desk. I then asked for her husband by name. "You are here to see Kevin. Do you have an appointment?" "No, we don't," I answered quickly. The receptionist smiled apologetically. "Unfortunately, without an appointment. This lady is the wife of Kevin from the product development division. She insists on seeing her husband." The receptionist briefly glanced at Lauren. For appearance's sake, Lauren gave a small nod and murmured a polite greeting. "Understood. I'll check with Kevin. May I ask your relationship to him?" Lauren tapped her fingers impatiently on the counter, looking irritated. "Why are you doing this, calling out my husband like this? What are you planning? You and Kevin haven't even met before, right?" Ignoring her questions, I handed my business card to the receptionist. Her demeanor changed instantly, looking back and forth between the card and me. "Mr. Smith from Global Tech. I apologize for the oversight. Please go to the 15th floor." Lauren looked surprised at the receptionist's sudden change of attitude. Without fully understanding the situation, we got into the elevator together. Partway up, 2 female employees joined us. Noticing Lauren, they started whispering to each other. "Is that the model Lauren? Lauren, accustomed to such attention, ignored them, maintaining her silence. Just as one of the women was about to approach Lauren, we reached our floor. Lauren brusquely stepped out of the elevator, expression tense. In the guest meeting room, after a short wait, the door opened. It was Kevin, Lauren's husband. Lauren, why are you here? Mr. Smith, what brings you here suddenly? Is there an issue with our products? He seemed more concerned about why I was there than about his wife's unexpected appearance. I'm sorry for barging in unannounced. Lauren, a former classmate, was curious about what her husband does, so I brought her here, I explained, showing respect. President Smith and his wife were classmates, Kevin said, a little surprised. I had no idea. I don't know the circumstances, but it seems my wife has caused some trouble. I'm truly sorry for that. Seeing the two men apologizing to each other, Lauren appeared awkward and embarrassed. Jason, I wanted to see what kind of place a junior high school dropout like you worked at. So, why did you bring me here? Lauren asked hesitantly, her eyes filled with suspicion. It seemed like the right time to reveal the truth. After graduating from middle school, I had dropped out of high school to attend a programming school. Once I had a reasonable grasp of computer-related knowledge, I started looking for a job. However, no company was willing to hire me, given my junior high education. After much deliberation, I decided to register my own business at the tax office as a self-employed individual. I began taking on small retail tasks for computer peripherals and simple programming projects. Gradually, my business expanded, and I launched my own original e-commerce site. Initially, it was just small computer parts, but eventually, I started dealing in other electronics. Now my company, Global Tech Incorporated, where I serve as CEO, has grown into a major e-commerce site dealing in various gadgets, catering to both professionals and amateurs. Our main products are computers, tablets, cell phones, and projectors. Microtech Corporation, where we currently stood, manufactured the compact projector Micro Pro, which was our concept and exclusively sold on our website. Simply put, Microtech was a subcontractor for Global Tech Incorporated. But recently, the dynamics were changing. Listen, Lauren, the man you're looking at, your former classmate, is now the president of a company with an annual turnover of $30 billion. Moreover, it's been decided that Microtech will be merged with Global Tech through an M&A. In other words, this place is also his workplace. If you don't want to ruin your marital relationship, you better take back what you said earlier and apologize to him right now. Chided by her husband, Lauren looked up at me with a miserable expression, but she wasn't the type to easily change her attitude. You've always been the worst, but now you're even worse, she snapped. Instead of apologizing, she glared at me with an even sharper look. Hey, she muttered, seemingly indifferent to the state of her marriage. Feeling uncomfortable, she swiftly opened a conference room door and left. Alone, Kevin, looking astonished at my reaction, muttered, I apologize for any inconvenience. Please forgive her on my behalf. He then seemed to remember something. Suddenly, Lauren once told me, when she was drunk, that she never licks any man she targets. Getaway. She was confident that every man would fall for her. But she mentioned there was one person who never paid her any attention. Could that have been you? His question made me recall the incident at our middle school graduation. Nobody can resist Lauren, so that was about me. But knowing this fact now didn't change how I felt. I didn't understand why Lauren had developed feelings for me, and frankly, I didn't think it was necessary to know. Her kind of temperament, playing with men while juggling several at a time, was not what I liked. My disinterest must have been apparent because Kevin gave a resigned smile. You just made a face that shows you have no interest in my wife. Lauren isn't a villain. It's like those kindergarten boys who tease the girls they like. Perhaps Lauren harbored similar feelings towards you. She wanted to prove how happy she is now, making you regret not paying attention to her. I see. The way Lauren looked at me during the bingo game and earlier was not sweet affection, but a dark mix of obsession and jealousy. It's an overcomplicated situation. It made me feel somewhat disheartened, but perhaps Kevin felt the same way. In a sense, being married to her, he might be suffering more. But maintaining his composure, he straightened up and said, "I apologize for this. I must be going." Before leaving the room, he was likely heading home to have a serious conversation with his wife. At least Kevin doesn't judge people by their surface. In the past few months, through professional interactions, I had come to understand his character. The setting sun started to glare into the meeting room. Well, time for me to head back and get to work. I'd thought of leaving Microtech Corporation a few months later. As usual, I fed my pet turtle, Buddy, before leaving home. It was a bit chilly for cycling on my road bike, but I anticipated that my metabolism would increase and warm up my body as I rode. Dressed in a breathable windbreaker, I set off for the office. It was about time for the cherry blossoms to start blooming. As I rode through the central streets of Manhattan, a large electronic advertisement caught my eye at a traffic light. Be more honest than yesterday. Apollo, newly launched last month. My company, Global Tech Inc., announced a new product, Apollo. Now prominently displayed in the electronic advertisement, Apollo is not related to the Apollo space mission, but rather derives from apologies. The new product, Apollo, is a gift-type wireless earphone with a messaging feature. There are two key differences from regular wireless earphones. 1. The sender can record a message for the recipient. 2. The message doesn't automatically reach the recipient. It only plays for 30 minutes if the earphones are worn at a specified time and location. Essentially, if you don't know when and where your intended recipient will wear the earphones, your message may never be delivered. The most important thing when giving a gift is to empathize with the recipient, putting them first without being self-centered. That's why Apollo has such a specification. This inconvenient communication method, contrary to the high-tech era, piqued interest, especially among young people on social media. The Apollo wireless earphones became a hit, reflecting good sales. People like Lauren, unable to effectively convey their feelings, are plentiful in this world. Though I will never reciprocate her feelings, I hope to help those who struggle to express themselves someday. I hope that Apollo is used to convey her true feelings to someone else, not me, of course. That recipient could be anyone, her husband, family, friends, or anyone else. According to Greek mythology, Apollo is also the god of healing. I have no presumptuous intention of curing her complicated personality, but those bound by jealousy and obsession could surely be saved by embracing honesty, becoming more loved by others, and learning to love themselves. Gazing into the big black eyes of Buddy as he munched on his food, I wish for the happiness of that beautiful witch who will never appear before me again. Miles, my boss, scowled and said something really ridiculous as I stood at the front desk of the opulent hotel, trying to make sense of the situation. The inn was tucked up in the mountains, so even though summer was almost here, it was still chilly outside. I began to feel as though my future was slipping away, and a wave of fear swept over me. Since Miles offered to plan this business trip, I've had a horrible feeling, but I may have relaxed because I assumed that since I made the reservation, everything would be all right. All of the reservations I had made under my name had somehow been canceled when I went to the front desk to confirm our reservation when I arrived at the inn. Miles gently pushed me aside and finished the check-in procedure for everyone while I frantically tried to figure out what had gone wrong. That's when I recognized my negative emotion had materialized. Everyone received room keys from Miles, but when it was my turn, he said I wouldn't have a room. Miles made a big show of forgetting my room, but he showed no signs of concern. But he had no idea that when he found out who I really was, this stunt would backfire. Miles was astonished beyond belief, but I was even more taken aback by his true nature. I'm 42 years old, and my name is David Wilson. My parents separated when I was a little child, and my grandparents reared me at my father's house. I never felt deprived, even though we relocated from the city to a rural location. I never quite fit in at my new school, though, and a lot of my students made fun of me for my unusual living arrangement. Nothing changed, not even in high school, and I had to skip school a lot because of people's critical looks. However, my grandparents were always nice and encouraging, and they never voiced any complaints. I vividly recall their support when I made the decision to leave high school. Now that they are both dead, I am 42 years old, surrounded by my new family, and we have a contented life together. Naturally, I want to love my kids as much as my grandparents loved me. Whatever occurs, I will keep a loving and compassionate eye over them. In order to avoid burdening my grandparents after high school, I began working part-time at construction sites. I worked for a few years before the contracting company's president, Mr. Michael Yates, noticed me and gave me a full-time job. He gave a high school dropout like me an opportunity, and for that I will always be grateful. I was promoted to sales manager after closing numerous deals as a salesperson. There have even been recent whispers that I could be promoted to head of the department. However, they chose to appoint an external applicant for the role in keeping with Mr. Yates's goal of introducing new ideas to the business. I had great expectations and trusted Mr. Yates's judgment, but the person who arrived exceeded my expectations. As of right now, I am Miles, your new department head. You jerks should be grateful that I'm even letting you work for me, he continued. Miles, the new head of the department, had been hired as a career employee from a large factory. His powerful presence and aggressive manner made everyone uncomfortable right away. Mr. Yates had stated in his introduction that Miles had been a very good sales manager at his prior position. Even if it were the case, his contemptuous attitude and treatment of us as disposable tools led to instant animosity among the department. As a manager, I tried to talk to Miles, hoping to create a better work environment for the team. Miles, we have many talented employees here. Could you please acknowledge that and treat them with the respect they deserve? I asked. You should be grateful to be working under me. None of that matters. By the way, where did you go to college? He brushed off my concerns and suddenly hit me with a question I wasn't expecting. Unsure but honest, I answered. I dropped out of high school. Hearing that, Miles let out a slight snort, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. Well, that explains why you talk about such insignificant things. Low education means low value, he said, placing great importance on academic credentials. He probably boasted about having graduated from a prestigious university, completely dismissing anything I had to say. After enduring his endless bragging, I was eventually kicked out of his office, as though I were a nuisance. From the next day on, my new nickname became the Dropout. Miles seemed to find pleasure in mocking my lack of education, even publicly ridiculing me in meetings attended by all department managers and above. Until Miles showed up, no one at the company had ever judged me based on my education. Everyone evaluated me based on my work ethic and results. That's why, despite my background, I was able to focus on my job, and even now, there are far more people in the company rooting for me than for Miles. Jealous of my growing success, Miles began to find amusement in harassing me. He shoved all the tedious, time-consuming tasks onto me, and before I knew it, my desk was buried under an ever-growing pile of paperwork. The stack of documents on my desk was so high it looked like it could collapse at any moment. You're supposed to be competent, right? A high school dropout should at least be able to handle these easy tasks. Don't you think? Miles taunted. On top of that, Miles even dumped his own work on me, which left me with no time for my actual responsibilities, causing me to make simple mistakes, like missing deadlines. See, a dropout can't even handle the easy stuff, he would say with a smug grin before throwing more snide comments and heading out of the office right on time, leaving me to work late into the night. It wasn't unusual for me to get home after midnight due to all the overtime. Exhausted and sleep-deprived, I was starting to become mentally unstable. Miles always acted arrogantly in front of me. However, I often caught him sucking up to the high-ups and executives, and each time, it seemed like he was spreading rumors that I was incompetent. I figured that denying the rumors would just sound like excuses, so I focused on proving myself through my work. After a few weeks, the harassment stopped, and I could finally handle my workload without issues. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was the calm before the storm. Sure enough, I soon heard that Miles was in charge of this year's company trip. It seemed he had volunteered in an attempt to curry favor with the executives. A few days later, when he still hadn't come up with a travel plan, Miles suddenly demanded that we, the employees, come up with ideas. His unreasonable order left the entire department silent. Frustrated, Miles began shouting angrily, "Doesn't anyone know of a good place? What a bunch of useless, low-educated idiots." His temper worsened by the day, and soon his frustration was directed squarely at me. "Hey, drop out. You've had an easy life with nothing to do, so surely you know of a nice place, right?" "Well, I'm not good at anything besides work." Miles clicked his tongue loudly and stormed off, his footsteps heavy. Although I had a suggestion in mind, I hesitated, worried that it might cause trouble for the inn, so I kept quiet. As the days passed, Miles still couldn't make a decision. His mood grew even darker. "If we're going on a company trip, I know a luxury inn in the neighboring prefecture that offers good rates, but I'm not keen on recommending it." One day, while I was muttering to myself in the break room, Miles suddenly appeared out of nowhere and spoke up. "The luxury inn you mentioned, are you talking about this one?" He waved a brochure for the inn in front of me, his grin whitening as he stepped closer. "If you've got connections to get a good rate at this inn, then you'd better make the reservation." The inn Miles referred to was indeed the one I didn't want to recommend, but the budget we had wouldn't cover accommodations for everyone, no matter how I crunched the numbers. There was a way to make it work within the budget, but I worried that Miles' behavior might cause problems for the inn. I tried to act like I'd forgotten, but Miles pestered me daily to make the reservation. "Hey, you made the reservation, right?" Worn down by Miles' persistence, I reluctantly made the reservation for the whole group. "Yes, I've made the reservation. I also received the cost estimate and some guidelines from the inn, so please review them." I handed him the documents from the inn, and Miles snatched them from me with a sly grin. I wasn't sure what he was planning, but since I had made the reservation myself, I figured it would be fine. Miles quickly started organizing the trip, but as he left, I had a feeling he was smirking at me. When I turned around, I caught Miles giving me a sideways glance, shooing me away like I was a nuisance. A cold chill ran down my spine, and an unsettling sense of fear gripped me. I couldn't stop shaking. On the day of the trip, Miles was confidently taking charge from the start. However, the sightseeing spots he had chosen were unimpressive, and the reactions from the group were lukewarm at best. Sensing the underwhelming mood, Miles suddenly pinned the blame on me. We went to the places suggested by a dropout, and they were all mediocre and half-baked. Frustration building, Miles went out of his way to paint me as the bad guy. I knew I should never listen to a dropout's advice. But don't worry, everyone, I chose the inn, so you're in good hands. That's not true. Miles picked the sightseeing spots, but I had arranged the inn. I protested. Complaining wouldn't do any good, so I kept silent. Cold stares were directed at me. When we arrived at the inn and I tried to check in, I was told there was no reservation under my name. The receptionist, clearly flustered, double-checked the booking ledger, only to find that all the reservations I had made had been canceled. As I frantically kept asking for confirmation, Miles stepped in with a smug smile and shoved me aside. "The reservation is under Miles." The receptionist, relieved that Miles's name was on the reservation, processed it. But something still felt off. Miles then began handing out room keys to everyone, but one key was missing. "This isn't everyone, right? Where's my room?" I asked, confused. Miles smirked and mockingly fed me pity. "Oh, right. Sorry about that, but I forgot to reserve a room for the high school dropout." "What do you mean?" "When I checked with the receptionist, it turned out that the reservation had been changed a week ago, just in time to avoid any cancellation fees. Apparently, after I had secured the reservation, Miles had rebooked it under his name and deliberately reduced the number of rooms. If I don't have a room, what am I supposed to do?" Though summer was approaching, the mountain air around the inn was still cold. As I panicked, Miles placed a hand on my shoulder and said something nonsensical, clearly mocking me. "Drop out? Sleep outside? It suits your low education, doesn't it?" The reception staff were also visibly alarmed by Miles's bizarre behavior, but given that this was a popular luxury inn, it was already fully booked. There was no way to free up another room at the last minute. My shoulders slumped, and a sense of hopelessness washed over me. The receptionist, now pale and panicking, scrambled to handle the sudden situation. However, I couldn't shake the bad feeling I had. As I had suspected, something like this might happen all along. Completely fed up with Miles's scheming, I took a deep breath and began to gather my belongings. "Understood, but don't regret this later." "Ha, what's there to regret about one dropout not staying with us?" Miles grinned smugly. Without another word, I turned my back on him and calmly walked out of the inn. The next morning, after enjoying a peaceful night elsewhere, I was awakened by the ringing of my phone. The call cut off just as I was about to answer. But when I checked my phone, I was shocked to see 100 missed calls from Miles. I must have slept deeply after the exhausting events of the previous day. Curious, I called him back, only to hear Miles's frantic, relieved voice. "Finally, I got through. Now we can fix this all." All of Miles's usual arrogance was gone. Still half asleep, I casually asked what the issue was. "What's the matter this early in the morning?" "What do you mean, what's the matter? You must have done something. Take responsibility." Miles was furious, shouting accusations, but I remained calm. "I told you yesterday not to regret it." My response only seemed to enrage Miles further. His voice rising again, he shouted, "So you did do something? You've ruined my perfect plan. What are you going to do about it?" "I didn't do anything that can't be fixed now. My reputation is ruined." Apparently, Miles' so-called perfect plan had completely unraveled, and he and the other employees had endured a terrible night. First, the luxury inn's highly anticipated gourmet dinner never arrived, and everyone had to buy their own food from a nearby convenience store. Meanwhile, I had spent a relaxing night at a nearby hot spring facility. Miles had been trying to call me all night, but I slept through it, unaware of the chaos. That explained all the missed calls. To make matters worse, the breakfast buffet, which was supposed to feature local delicacies, wasn't served either. Miles was being blamed for everything. Frustrated that I hadn't answered any of his calls, Miles had kept calling until morning, finally getting through to me. Miles kept blaming me relentlessly, refusing to listen to a word I said once. He had exhausted himself with complaints. I calmly explained the details I had already provided, along with the estimate. "I believe the note I gave you mentioned that if the reservation was made under a name other than mine, the standard rates would apply." "What's that paper?" "Oh, that one. But who actually reads that stuff?" "I did remind you to go over it carefully, didn't I?" I said. The reservation had been made at a special discount through my connections. However, it was clearly stated that if the booking was made under a different name, the budget would only cover basic accommodations without meals. Despite this, Miles, still refusing to accept the situation, kept blaming me. but nothing about the situation was going to change. Through the phone, I could hear Miles' raised voice along with the sound of executives and employees berating him in the background. At some point, I even heard Miles, with no choice left, apologizing profusely, bowing his head to those around him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just come here right now." His voice trembled with panic. Miles hung up the phone before I could respond. When I reluctantly returned to the inn, I saw Miles sitting uncomfortably on his knees, surrounded by a crowd at the front desk. "Good morning. Sorry to keep you waiting." "You? Why didn't you answer my calls? Where were you and what were you doing last night?" Miles suddenly jumped up from his kneeling position, but his legs had fallen asleep, and he immediately collapsed. Still, he glared at me with a furious expression, as if ready to pounce at any moment. The sight of Miles, pitiful and ridiculous, drew soft laughter from those around us. Blushing from embarrassment and clearly flustered, Miles grew more erratic, and I felt a bit sorry for him as I began explaining how I had spent the previous night. "I stayed at a nearby campground." "A campground? Where the hell is that?" "It's about a 20-minute walk from here. There's a hot spring nearby, and you can rent camping gear, so you don't need to bring anything." Intrigued by the unexpected answer, some of the employees gathered around me, and the conversation shifted to the campground, creating a bit of excitement. But Miles wasn't having it. "That's not the point. Why wasn't there any food served? You must have sabotaged everything out of jealousy because I'm more educated than you." Miles's angry shouts echoed through the lobby. Just then, the inn's manager, dressed impeccably in a suit, approached with a look of exasperation on her face. "I'm Emma, the owner of this inn." "Miles, was it? You can't speak like that to the owner of the inn." Miles was dumbfounded by her words. With a sigh, Emma stepped aside, allowing me to speak. "I am the owner of this inn." "What? How? What are you talking about? This makes no sense." Still yelling angrily, Miles refused to listen as usual. I had had enough. Emma snapped at him. "Miles, we clearly informed you when you rebooked the reservation. We told you that with your budget, it would only cover accommodations without meals. You agreed to that." Miles, now pale and sweating profusely, muttered excuses while looking down at the floor. I'd remember something being said during the booking, but I didn't really understand it, so this isn't my fault. It's the... At this point, Mr. Yates, who had been standing nearby with his arms crossed, finally spoke up, exasperated. "I've heard enough. Cut it out already." "Mr. Yates, no. You see, this is all a misunderstanding. It's not my fault." Miles frantically tried to justify himself to Mr. Yates, but his desperate excuses only made Mr. Yates sigh heavily and shake his head. I began to suspect how poorly thought out Miles's plans were during yesterday's sightseeing, but I never imagined he was this careless. Mr. Yates then bowed deeply to Emma to apologize before turning to glare coldly at Miles. Miles, meeting Mr. Yates's eyes, collapsed to the floor, curling up and crying like a child. Looking down at the pitiful Miles, I explained why I was the owner of the luxury inn. This inn was built on the mountain property my grandparents owned. For years, they had struggled with managing the land that had been passed down through generations, so I suggested building an inn at the location, which was already famous for its hot springs. My grandfather, a hot spring enthusiast, loved the idea and decided to open the inn as a retirement project, following my advice. Running the inn wasn't easy for my grandparents in their old age. That's when I decided to entrust Emma, an old acquaintance who had always cared for me like her own child, with the role of the inn manager. After my grandparents passed away, I inherited the mountain property and with it became the owner of the luxury inn. Under Emma's skillful management, the inn's reputation steadily grew, and before long, it became a popular high-end destination. Even now, many guests from all over the country visit to enjoy the secluded hot springs and locally sourced cuisine. It's become so popular that reservations are notoriously difficult to secure. By the way, the campground I mentioned earlier was something my grandfather started as a hobby. Growing up with the mountains as my playground, I would often escape to the campground whenever I had free time to enjoy some peace and solitude. Of course, the management is handled by acquaintances, so I don't have to get involved directly. I had only thought of the campsite as a backup plan, but I never imagined I'd actually be left out and have to use it. Despite repeatedly telling Miles to review the terms, he ignored them and dragged everyone into this mess. There was nothing left to say when Miles finally realized that I was the owner of the inn. His jaw dropped in shock, eyes wide as he stared at me. After a few seconds of stunned silence, Miles' expression shifted and suddenly he lashed out at me. "This is all your fault. Everyone's upset, so you should fix this. Stop making it sound like I'm the only one to blame." His irrational outburst made everyone around him sigh heavily. Emma, clearly irritated, shot Miles an icy glare and spoke sharply. "You were the one who changed the reservation, weren't you? We were willing to give you a discount as a favor to Mr. Wilson here. I'm his boss, and we're not going to go out of our way to treat someone who disrespects Mr. Wilson with kindness." Miles, overwhelmed by Emma's sharp words, turned pale and began trembling in fear, falling silent. Seeing him reduced to a quivering mess, the employees couldn't hold back their laughter, pointing at Miles as they mocked him. Just then, a young woman who worked at the inn as a maid approached, looking surprised. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Wait, Rachel, is this the troublesome dad you mentioned before?" The young woman who had called Miles' dad was Rachel, a maid working at the inn. To my surprise, Rachel turned out to be his daughter. Startled by this sudden revelation, Miles quickly straightened his posture and averted his gaze, pretending not to know her. "Dad? No, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not your father. You wouldn't want your daughter to see you in such an embarrassing situation, would you?" I muttered. At that, Miles suddenly stood up and rushed toward me, clearly agitated. "I told you, I'm not her father." "Miles, calm down," I said. His blatant behavior was becoming more and more uncomfortable to watch. Come to think of it, I suddenly remembered something. Ever since the company trip was first mentioned, Miles had been holding onto a brochure for this inn. Could it be that Miles had wanted to come here from the start just to see his daughter? That suspicion quickly turned into certainty. Could it be that you wanted to come here because your daughter works at this inn? Stop it. Don't say unnecessary things. And now that you mention it, you were unusually enthusiastic about this trip, Miles. Now red-faced with embarrassment, Miles desperately tried to shut me up, but his efforts were clumsy and ineffective. Mr. Yates, who had been silently observing Miles's actions, gently placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded as if he understood everything. Miles' face scrunched up with shame. He curled up and muttered to himself, clearly at a loss, unable to keep his composure. Emma stifled a laugh as she addressed Miles, trying to impress your daughter. Maybe you should start by listening to what people have to say. Rachel seemed to realize from the situation that Miles had caused trouble by going overboard, her face turning red and tears welling up. She bowed deeply to us, clearly embarrassed by her father's actions. "I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. My father always tries to show off in front of others, but he always ends up failing like this," she said. As Rachel spoke, clearly embarrassed, we all nodded in understanding. It made sense. If someone like Miles, who never listens and always acts unilaterally, was your father, you'd have your fair share of embarrassing stories. Miles tried to stop his daughter from apologizing, but Rachel glared at him with tears in her eyes. "I thought I'd finally gotten away from you. You're the worst." With those words, Rachel looked down and began to cry. When we asked for more details, we learned that Rachel had started working at the inn to escape from her father. As much as I had been annoyed by Miles, I couldn't help but feel a little sympathy when I realized that this trip was his desperate attempt to see his daughter, even if only as a guest. Miles, now more dejected than I had ever seen him, collapsed onto the floor, utterly defeated. Feeling a bit sorry for him, I decided to offer a small compliment. "You know, your father just tried a little too hard today. Besides, isn't he supposed to be highly educated and a very capable man?" Rachel looked surprised at my words, but then, as she revealed the truth, we all exchanged bewildered glances, stunned by what she said next. "That's not true. My father's just a show-off. Half of what he says about his education is practically a lie." According to Rachel, while Miles did graduate from a prestigious university, it took him 3 attempts to get in. Even then, he struggled to pass his courses, repeating several years. In fact, it took him over 5 years of repeated failures before he barely managed to graduate. We were all left speechless, our mouths agape as we learned the truth about Miles's so-called prestigious education that he had been so proud of. Miles had always been a firm believer in academic superiority, constantly belittling me for being a high school dropout. But after learning about his rather unfortunate and wasted 20s, I found myself at a loss for words. Miles, now realizing that his secret was out, covered his face, his ears turning bright red with shame as he curled up even smaller. Shortly after we returned from the company trip, Mr. Yates investigated Miles' past. It turned out that much of Miles' resume was exaggerated, if not outright false. At his previous company, Miles had also championed academic superiority, but in reality, he had advanced by taking credit for others' achievements and presenting them as his own. He repeated this pattern at every job. At the major manufacturer where he last worked, his brief stint as sales department head was considered a dark chapter in the company's history. His tenure there lasted only about 3 months before his true nature was revealed, and he was swiftly fired. Upon discovering Miles's true nature, Mr. Yates considered firing him, fearing that his presence could harm the company's performance. But out of mercy and hope for his reformation, he decided instead to demote him to a regular employee. No longer a department head, Miles became a pariah, treated as an outcast by his peers. With Miles demoted, my colleague recommended me for the position, and I was promoted to department head. While I felt embarrassed by the promotion, I also felt a strong sense of responsibility to live up to my team's expectations. As for Miles, now just a regular employee, he continued to carry himself arrogantly, but was utterly incompetent. In fact, he was more of a burden than anything, contributing nothing of value to the team. It was shocking how truly incapable he was. As I struggled with how to handle the situation, I thought of Rachel. I decided, as a last-ditch effort, to ask her if Miles had any strengths or hidden talents. What she told me was completely unexpected. "I'm so sorry, my father's so useless, but when it comes to the outdoors, he's surprisingly capable. In fact, he's really good at it." According to Rachel, the reason Miles kept failing in college was his passion for camping. He was such an avid camper that he spent most of the year at campsites, and even now, he still goes out camping from time to time. As a fellow camper, this piqued my interest. At the same time, I remembered a project I had been struggling with for some time. It was a request to find a way to repurpose an abandoned school in a rural area. The plan was to remodel the school into a campsite and lodging facility, but the project had stalled because we couldn't find a suitable manager. That's when I thought of Miles for the role. The following year, the remodeled campsite, built from the old school, was completed. I decided to have Miles work there as the facilities manager. To everyone's surprise, the facility quickly became a hit, with Miles's outdoor workshops becoming especially popular. His extensive knowledge and experience in the outdoors, something he proudly claims to be unmatched, proved true. Miles's survival skills, many of which even I didn't know, became widely talked about for their potential use in disaster relief situations, attracting media attention and even TV interviews. For the first time in his life, Miles, now frequently relied upon by others, was moved to tears, saying he had never felt so valued. Rachel, drawing on her experience as a maid at the inn, also began helping manage the facility alongside her father. While Miles was eager to show his daughter how capable he was, it seemed that Rachel kept a close eye on him to ensure he didn't get carried away. Life is full of surprises, and we never know when or where our past experiences will come in handy. These days, I find myself envying Miles for possessing something beyond academic achievements. As for me, I plan to focus on preserving the nature my grandparents left behind and think about what legacy I can pass on to the next generation. What the devil is this? What's going on? It was obvious that something was very wrong because Samantha, who is typically cool and collected, was agitated and raising her voice. Tension immediately spread among the other staff members, even among me, who had only been here a few months. We hurried over to assemble next to Samantha's desk after a brief period of stillness during which everyone exchanged anxious looks. She appeared to be trembling a little as she stared at the computer screen, her mouth moving silently. I never thought our bank would experience such a situation. I reasoned that since I'm concealing my actual history here, I shouldn't be involved. Nevertheless, I couldn't watch helplessly as my coworkers, with whom I had been through many highs and lows over the past few months, faced difficulties. Tate is my name. I work for the bank's risk management department in the credit risk management division, and I'm 39 years old. This is a regional bank branch. I don't work for a huge bank. I don't have a girlfriend, and I'm single. I had considered getting married at one point, but at this age, I don't think it's really essential anymore. I'm happy to concentrate only on my work and am not actively looking for a spouse. Now, most people think of a person behind a counter when they think of a banker. Although it's not my job, that's not incorrect. I suppose you could say that I'm more of a background supporting, behind-the-scenes kind of person. Banks handle money, thus we need to be very careful. It goes without saying that controlling finances is important, but so is managing consumer data. It is absolutely unacceptable for any personal information to be leaked. In the risk management department, it is our responsibility to concentrate on these types of risk prevention strategies. A bank's loans in particular carry credit risk, which, if improperly handled, could jeopardize the bank's continued existence. It necessitates exact control and advanced skill because of this. As I previously stated, I work at this bank as an ordinary employee without a title, but it isn't because I've been aimlessly wandering around till I was 39. I held the steady position of section chief at my prior employer. They even offered me a managerial position when I arrived at this bank, but I declined. I had never had a position in a bank before, and I was aware that the financial establishment would not be pleased with someone like me hired for my abilities. What do you think would have happened if I had also taken a managerial position? Conflicts annoy me, and I detest witnessing arguments. I decided to start off as a regular employee in a position that wouldn't cause any trouble because I just want to live a calm life. I couldn't handle the constant competition for promotions and the small-scale power conflicts, even at my former employer. And I was the one who had to put up with the late-night overtime and business travels since I was a single man working with married coworkers. Leaving the staff to quarrel like way annoyed me, but I don't intend to be critical of those who have families. That's actually the job of the supervisor. That was a big factor in my decision to change careers. I decided to try my hand at selling myself when I learned that this risk management department was hiring, and I was pleasantly surprised to be hired. My arrival here was entirely coincidental. I didn't want to upset anyone, and I didn't want to work in the toxic environment of my previous job ever again. That was my only concern. I began working at this bank a few months ago. The workload was excessive given the nature of the department, but it was insignificant in comparison to my previous position. I could leave on time after the task was finished, and no one made me put in excessive overtime. My life was a lot more satisfying because this was typical here, when it hadn't been for me previously. It seemed like they were taking advantage of your sense of purpose at my former job, where the more competent you were, the more work they threw at you. I owed all to Samantha Kirkland, my direct supervisor and the head of the credit risk management department, who created the atmosphere I had been dreaming of. Her position was gained by sheer competence at the age of 36. In my opinion, she is completely capable and devoid of flaws. When you combine that with her beauty, nobody could match her. Everyone should handle their own work. That's fundamental. Samantha loved that phrase the most. If you can't handle your own tasks, what are you even doing? Was her way of putting it. Naturally, there were many that disagreed with Samantha, but I don't mind that viewpoint. Mason, a coworker who was 12 years my junior, was one of them. When he was 27, he frequently griped about Samantha during our downtime. Samantha lacks a sense of teamwork, much like the Iron Lady. As the team leader, it is her responsibility to supervise the workload, identify each team member's strengths, and assign assignments accordingly. Rather, she does everything by herself, and we seldom have any opportunity to gain experience or demonstrate outcomes. I take assuming you agree with me, Tate. Not knowing how to respond, I just smiled awkwardly. Samantha wasn't wrong. In fact, most people thought she was pretty spot on, though no one wanted to say it out loud. That said, Mason wasn't entirely wrong either. We are a team. If someone was slacking off, it would be a different story, but in our credit risk management section, everyone was earnest and hardworking. Slacking off didn't even seem to cross their minds, so the idea that it would be faster if we split the work among everyone made sense too. Not wanting to take sides, I just took a sip of my coffee and said, "Yeah, I guess so." Mason kept inviting me for coffee during breaks, and each time, it became a routine for him to gripe about Samantha. Apparently, he wasn't too fond of her. While Mason was a capable employee, I always felt he had a bit of a lazy streak. He wasn't slacking, but there were times when I'd see him daydreaming at his desk. To Mason, it was probably just a short break, but Samantha was strict about that and would often criticize him for it. He'd frequently mutter, "Man, she really hates me." A few more weeks passed. Recently, there had been an increase in loan requests, which meant our credit risk management section was swamped. We had to be cautious about issuing loans, but even more importantly, we had to keep a close eye on the loans we had already issued. If a borrower went bankrupt, recovering the loan would be difficult, so knowing when to cut off a loan was crucial. Because of this, we were doing more work outside the office, and I found myself working overtime for the first time in a while. Technically, I had finished my own tasks. Even if I had to work overtime, it only took about an hour to wrap things up. But the reason I stayed late every night was to help out the others. No one asked me to, but I wanted to do it. The people here had been so kind, patiently teaching me when I didn't know what I was doing. There was no reason not to help them when they were struggling. Mason was one of those people. Whenever I helped him out, he'd say, "Tate, you're a lifesaver. I'm so sorry for causing you trouble these past few days. Thanks for your help. It didn't feel bad to be appreciated." I mentioned earlier that Samantha was strict with Mason because he took more breaks than others. But I knew something. After Mason took his short efficiency breaks, he worked harder and faster than anyone else. Even though I'd only been here a few months, I could tell that Mason was dedicated to his work. And despite being a lonely, almost 40-year-old single guy, he was always kind to me. That went for the rest of the team too. Naturally, I wanted to help out and work together, but there was always someone to spoil that atmosphere. Of course, it was Samantha. "Mason, isn't that your job? I've seen you sneaking in those little breaks. If you've got time to take all those short rests, you should be working. If you were more efficient, Tate wouldn't have to help you with tasks he's already finished." Mason's face tightened, and he looked like he was about to argue. I quickly stepped in to mediate. "Samantha, it's not like that. I'm doing this because I want to." As you can see, I have no wife or kids, and I'm free to help out. Is it so bad that I want to assist my colleagues?" At that, Samantha went silent. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but eventually just nodded and returned to her desk, saying it was fine as long as I didn't mind. I let out a sigh of relief, but as expected, Mason couldn't keep quiet. "What's her problem? Seriously, it's not like I'm slacking off. I just took a 5-minute break to rest my eyes, and she's giving me grief over it. Come on, calm down. She doesn't mean any harm. Samantha's just trying to make sure everyone can leave on time. She's willing to play the bad guy to make that happen." As I tried to calm Mason down, he fell silent, clearly understanding what Samantha was thinking in his own way. It was almost 6:00 p.m., so I hurried to finish my work. Just as I took some of Mason's tasks to move them to my desk, something unusual happened. Samantha raised her voice. What is this? What's happening?" The fact that the usually calm and composed Samantha was flustered and shouting made it clear that something was seriously wrong. Even though I'd only been here a few months, I could sense it, and the tension spread among the other staff members. After exchanging tense glances, everyone rushed over to gather near Samantha's desk. Samantha was staring at her computer screen, her mouth moving wordlessly, and her body seemed to tremble slightly. What happened? Peeking from a distance, I saw the bank's internal security system flashing a warning on her screen. Sensing trouble, I ran over to Samantha and asked quickly, "What happened?" I got a notification about a security software update, so I clicked the link to log in, but I couldn't log in no matter how many times I tried. Then the system started lagging, and now this warning message popped up. At first glance, the website looked like the usual security site, and I even confirmed it was using HTTPS. But something about the logo at the bottom felt off. Before I could say more, the screen suddenly went black. From behind me, I heard worried murmurs from the others who had been watching. "This is bad. It might be malware. Unauthorized access." With that, everyone's eyes turned to me, and for good reason. For us, a data breach involving customer information was unthinkable. People have probably seen companies apologizing in press conferences after hackers leaked personal information following unauthorized access. That's likely what everyone was imagining. For a bank, trust is everything. And right now, that trust was under threat. It seemed like someone had tricked Samantha into entering her credentials on a fake site, and now they were using those credentials to steal data. Whoever was behind this was highly skilled. This must be a professional hacker with advanced skills. Now that they've breached our system, there's a good chance they've planted a back door. We can't handle this ourselves anymore. We need to contact a forensic investigation team immediately. We were out of time. Every passing minute counted. The hacker was extracting personal data. But this is a bank, and we fortified our defenses for such threats. The more sensitive the information, the stronger the protections. Breaking through wouldn't be easy, even for a skilled hacker. Although everyone was initially stunned, these were seasoned professionals. Mason, leading the charge, said, "I'll go report to the manager, Kent," and with that, the team sprang into action despite the underlying panic. Everyone was doing their best to help. Some called headquarters, others contacted the branch manager, and some were already reaching out to security firms to arrange forensic analysis. While the rest of us were moving quickly, Samantha remained frozen, her eyes wide with fear. She muttered, "What should I do? What should I do?" seemingly unable to process what was happening. There was no time to explain again. I wanted to offer her some encouragement, but I knew mere words wouldn't be enough. There was only one thing to do. I steeled myself and shouted, "You're not the type of person who gives up that easily." My words seemed to snap Samantha back to reality. Her eyes regained focus, and she looked determined once again. She slapped her own cheeks as if to snap herself out of it, and the panic in her expression vanished. That's right. What am I doing in this state? There's work that needs to be done. I need to get a grip, she said. That's the resolute Samantha I knew. But just as things started to settle, another problem arose. Mason and another employee contacted the security company to request a forensic investigation. However, since it was after hours, there were only a few staff members available to respond. Although the investigation could still proceed due to their 24-hour response system, there was a logistical problem. This is a regional bank branch in a rural area. Even if a representative were dispatched immediately, it would take at least 30 minutes for them to arrive. Ideally, we shouldn't touch the computer until the specialist arrives, but we couldn't afford to wait. I started thinking fast. Why did I come to this bank, leaving my past behind to start over? It only took a few seconds, but it felt like I had been thinking for hours. Finally, I made up my mind. Without saying a word, I sat down in front of Samantha's desk and placed my hands on the keyboard. Tate, what are you doing? They told us not to touch anything. Samantha protested. I responded calmly, overriding her words. The bank is in trouble. Let me do what I can. I can't just sit back and watch. Samantha's eyes wavered at my words. No one knew what the right course of action was at this point, but if someone could lead us to the correct solution, they had to act. Forensic analysis of ransomware requires advanced log analysis skills, technical expertise, and experience. In other words, an average security engineer wouldn't be able to handle it. That's why companies usually rely on outside specialists for situations like this. In larger corporations, there may be in-house engineers, but due to cost and logistics, a small rural bank like ours didn't have such a luxury. That much was common sense for someone like me. This was probably why the hacker had targeted our branch in the first place. Once they gained access here, it might only be a matter of time before they could breach the headquarters' critical databases. The attacker was more formidable than we had imagined. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and started typing on the keyboard. Samantha moved to stop me, but Mason shook his head, holding her back. Everyone else, though worried, could only stand by and watch as I worked. The tension was palpable, but adrenaline coursed through me, and my fingers moved faster and faster on the keyboard. After a while, I finally raised my head, letting out a sigh. Immediately, questions came at me from all directions. What happened? I don't really understand what you were doing, but is it over? Someone asked. I smiled and explained the situation. I managed to secure the important personal data. I moved it to a safe server, so that should be fine. However, the attacker was quick, and there's a possibility they extracted some past contract data. The data extracted wasn't sensitive customer information, just basic contract details from past agreements. While there was a small leak, it wasn't the kind of disaster that would force us to apologize to our customers on our knees. Upon hearing that, the tension in the room lifted. Some collapsed into their chairs, while others let out shouts of joy. But Samantha remained solemn, staring at me intently. Not long after, the representative from the security company arrived. I explained the situation and asked them to double-check everything. The representative looked surprised, but quickly confirmed the results, muttering, "This is incredible. As you mentioned, the virus threat appears to be neutralized. We didn't detect any backdoors either. However, considering the possibility of future attacks, well, it looks like I won't be needed here. I'm impressed, Tate. So, this is where you've been." "Yes, well, it's been a while." "How have you been?" I replied. Since the representative and I knew each other from before, the rest of the team watched our conversation in puzzlement. Shortly afterward, Mr. Oli, the bank president, along with some executive officers, arrived. Having heard about the incident, they bombarded the representative with questions, who reassured them that everything was under control and briefly explained the next steps before leaving. Mr. Oli and the executives, clearly busy, said they would explain any consequences later and left. It was already past 9 p.m. Then, at long last, Mason turned to me with a curious look and asked his question. "So, what's the deal here?" I kept quiet because I didn't want to interfere. "But Tate, you're not just a regular guy, are you?" Mason, always sharp, had suspected from the moment I joined that I wasn't an ordinary employee. "Yeah, I've had my suspicions. I mean, someone who's 39 and had a solid career before starting as a regular employee. That was a red flag. Plus, you seem to know that security company rep pretty well. So, Tate, your previous job was as a security engineer, right?" Mason's confident declaration made me burst out laughing, perhaps finally releasing the tension that had built up. "Right on," I said, and with that, I decided to reveal my past to Mason. I hadn't planned on telling anyone, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to share it with Mason and the others in our department. Even though everyone still had work left to do, they indulged me for a few minutes as I shared my story. As we all chatted and laughed together, I realized something. Samantha wasn't part of the group. The next day, as soon as I arrived at work, Samantha called me over. I had a feeling I knew what this was about, so I followed her without asking. It was fall, and the chill in the air made a cup of hot coffee taste just right. We sat on a bench in the park behind the bank, and without a word, Samantha handed me a cup of black coffee. Even though Samantha wasn't fond of black coffee and had mentioned liking sweet things, it seemed she knew that I preferred mine black. I thought to myself that despite her tough exterior with Mason, she must actually be looking out for him as well. In fact, I had heard talk of Mason being up for a promotion. As I pondered these things and took a sip of the coffee she gave me, Samantha finally spoke. "I overheard something, Tate. You used to be a hacker, didn't you?" "Well, most people call it white hat hacker these days. Technically, a hacker isn't a bad term, but when people mean it in a bad way, they call it a cracker." "Oh, sorry. I caught myself before I went too far with technical explanations." But Samantha, smiling in a way I had never seen before, said, "Go on." Since we still had time before work started, and she seemed genuinely interested, I decided to share a bit more. I explained the technical terms I had used the day before and told her the same story I had shared with Mason and the others. The term hacker often brings negative connotations, but in reality, it's not inherently bad. Put simply, it refers to someone highly skilled in computers. A cracker is someone who uses that knowledge for malicious purposes, like the unauthorized access we dealt with yesterday. Since most people can't distinguish between the two, they started calling ethical hackers white hat hackers. I'm not bragging, but back in the day, I was considered a genius white hat hacker. I loved math and physics as a kid and was the kind of elementary schooler who'd say Isaac Newton was my favorite person. I was so into the sciences that I chose Fermat's last theorem as the topic for my thesis. Looking back, those days were really fun because I felt like I could do anything. I was proud of using my skills to help people, which is why I pursued a career as a security engineer. I wanted to become skilled enough to work as a freelancer in my 20s. That was my goal. So, I threw myself into planning, implementing, operating, and maintaining security systems, even training younger engineers. I obtained certifications like CISSP, which is highly regarded in the industry, and CISM, because I wanted to specialize in security. By my mid-30s, my career was smooth sailing. Given my track record, I was supposed to take a key position at headquarters. But I turned it down, saying, "I believe it's crucial to have someone at rural branches who can respond to security issues immediately." In my experience, branches are often targeted, and important data has been extracted from simple work computers. Crackers know how to exploit security holes, and they're well aware of companies' manpower shortages and cost-cutting measures. That's why I was assigned to this rural branch. But that wasn't the only reason. There was something else. A lingering feeling that brought me here, something unresolved. "Samantha Nash, do you remember me? I asked. Samantha's eyes widened in surprise when I mentioned her maiden name, but then she quickly softened her expression and said, "So, it was you. You were that engineer back then." A moment of silence passed as I reflected on the past. It was several years ago, long before I came to this bank. At the time, I had been working for a different company when we received a request from a business run by a man named Mr. Nash. He wanted to discuss improving his company's security, and I was assigned to handle the project. However, just before the meeting, Mr. Nash suddenly passed away due to illness, and his daughter Samantha, who had been groomed as his successor, took over the company. Just like I had a past, so did Samantha. Before becoming a department head, she was once the president of her father's company. Samantha had managed to run things at the top after her father's sudden death, but things did not go so well. It was likely that being the daughter of the president, Mr. Nash, she faced backlash. After all, a young woman with little experience had easily taken over the role of president simply because of her lineage. When the bank cut off funding, the company's finances quickly plunged into the red. Even so, Samantha, determined to keep the company her father built alive, tackled everything with a positive attitude. In fact, I once visited the company during her tenure as president, intending to discuss a contract initiated during her father's time. When I arrived, I witnessed Samantha arguing with her employees. She was passionately explaining the importance of strengthening security and stressing that they should invest in maintenance and inspection. But the employees weren't having it. They were saying things like, "If you're going to spend money, give us a raise instead." I remember it vividly. In the end, the contract fell through, and I didn't meet with Samantha again after that. But I later heard that the company had gone bankrupt. The image of Samantha's determined face as she earnestly tried to win everyone over stuck with me. We had only met once, and yet that image of her repeatedly bowing her head to try and persuade people left a strong impression on me. When I heard that her company had gone under, and she had abandoned her father's name, Nash, and taken on her mother's maiden name, Kirkland, I became curious. A few years later, I was considering a job change when Mr. Obi, the bank's president, invited me to dinner. He had heard I was looking for a new job and headhunted me. Well, I had done my share of selling myself to the bank beforehand, so it wasn't exactly the typical headhunting scenario. Originally, I had planned to take the job at the bank's headquarters, but something Mr. Obi said made me reconsider completely. Our branches really need to strengthen their security soon. If you came on board, it would be a great help. I'd love your advice. We'll start with this branch. Samantha Kirkland is actively pushing for these changes, so it makes sense to start there. There are plenty of people named Nash across the country, so I wasn't sure. But in a way, it was a gamble. Could it be that the former Nash, the woman president I'd met back then, was now going by Kirkland? Maybe I could see her again. That hope drove me to request an assignment at this branch. I kept my previous career hidden, as I mentioned before, to avoid creating waves. That was the only reason. As I finished my story, I glanced over at Samantha, who had been listening intently, and saw that tears were streaming down her face. Had I said something wrong? Maybe bringing up the past was a mistake. Not knowing how to comfort her, especially since I had little experience with women, I panicked and stammered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable by bringing up old memories." As I stepped back, Samantha gently said, "No, that's not it." Her voice was soft and kind, and I breathed a sigh of relief as I raised my head. Samantha, still gripping her cup of sweetened coffee, seemed lost in thought. She looked down for a moment, then raised her head again and gazed straight into my eyes. I froze, caught by her brown eyes as she spoke. "I'm touched that you remembered that young, inexperienced woman who had just become a company president. From your perspective, I must have seemed like a complete novice who didn't even understand the basics of management. Yet, I was arrogantly lecturing you about security. It's laughable, really. There were so many things I should have focused on, but I didn't. In the end, after that, the company's financial troubles deepened, and a security breach led to a data leak. I had to take responsibility, and I closed the company. I held my breath, surprised by this revelation. Suddenly, everything made sense. Samantha's breakdown the day before, her panic. She must have been reliving the trauma from that time. Even a small company can be brought to its knees by a data leak, sometimes leaving behind massive debts. It seems Samantha had distanced herself from her father's name, Nash, because of those debts. Apparently, her father, in a desperate attempt to hide the company's financial troubles, had borrowed money from some shady sources to escape the debt collectors. Samantha had started using her mother's maiden name, Kirkland. Then, Samantha revealed something unexpected. I actually remembered you too. I didn't recognize you at first because you've lost weight and cut your hair short. But back then, when my family was being pointed at and people whispered about our company's impending bankruptcy, not a single person stood by us. Not even when the debt collectors were chasing us. But you showed up for that meeting with me. It made me a little happy, you know. She went on to tell me how she became the head of this department. It turned out that the branch manager here was her relative. Concerned for her well-being, he took her in because he valued her diligence. But Samantha, not wanting to be seen as relying on connections, had put on a tough front, playing the role of the Iron Lady and being strict with everyone, including herself. She had hidden her true self all because she wanted to be recognized for her own abilities. Because I was the branch manager's relative, no one would say anything to my face. But yesterday, Tate, you called me out without caring about that. It really woke me up in more ways than one. Thank you. As I looked at Samantha, her cheeks flushed. I felt as though my heart had been grabbed. It seemed that despite only meeting once before, we had been drawn to each other all along, like opposite poles of a magnet. I said, "Can you stop with the confusing metaphors?" She replied, but she was smiling brighter than I had ever seen her before. The usual look of pressure and responsibility had completely melted away, revealing the true Samantha underneath. Later, the cracker was arrested, but Samantha took responsibility for what had happened and offered to resign. However, everyone convinced her to stay. It was true that Samantha had acted hastily, pressing the button due to the trauma of her previous company's collapse after being hacked. But because of the swift actions that followed, mine included, we were able to avoid the worst-case scenario. So it was agreed with the bosses that Samantha would start over as a regular employee. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they heard the news. Mason, too, shared in that relief. If Samantha leaves, this place is doomed, he joked. Strangely enough, I was the one chosen to take over as her replacement. As Mason put it, the fact that someone who was supposed to work at headquarters is a department head at a branch is already unusual, so just roll with it. With encouragement from everyone, including Samantha herself, I didn't really have a choice but to accept being the department head. In a specialized field like risk management, it wasn't easy, and there were times when I had to work overtime. But we had established a flexible and cooperative relationship that made the work rewarding. Even Mason, who had once criticized Samantha's methods, now said, "I guess I should just trust my own judgment. My goal is to establish my own unshakable style, no matter what anyone says," indicating that he had come to understand her way of thinking. Similarly, Samantha had softened. Sometimes working together as a team really is the faster way, she admitted, even apologizing to Mason for being too hard on him in the past. Her ability to acknowledge her mistakes so honestly showed what a kind-hearted person she was. Mason, in turn, promised to be more mindful, avoiding the habit of wandering off or daydreaming at his desk. In this way, we created a space where everyone respected each other's perspectives and values. As a result, I was finally living the peaceful life I had always envisioned. Let's resume where we left off the previous time. Before I knew it, Hut had been behind me, removing the coffee cup from my grasp and giving me a tearful look. My heart pounded. That night was the beginning of all that had happened with her. Robert. Thompson. Robert. My name was called just as I was ready to settle into the couch in the waiting area. The tone of the voice seemed a little abrupt. Was it because I didn't arrive at my appointed time? I didn't want to be late, really. I informed them ahead of time that I would be leaving promptly due to a dentist appointment. Nonetheless, I was delayed by my manager, Amy. This is something she always does on purpose. Damn you, Amy, that female boss. The dentist was examining my x-ray angrily when I hurried into the examination room. "It's not a cavity," he declared. I exclaimed in shock as I sat in the examination chair. "Your toothache is caused by clenching. Not only do you grind your teeth while you sleep, but you also clench your teeth involuntarily all the time. Are you experiencing any stress at work?" He was right on the money. "I'll give you some painkillers again, but be aware and try not to clench your teeth." I was taken aback. Humans have a tendency to clench their teeth when they are under stress, and doing so repeatedly can make them hurt. Amy, my female supervisor, is the main source of my stress. After all, she believes that a subordinate's mistakes are their own, but their successes are hers. She nitpicks all the time and gets upset if things don't go her way. She is skilled at making disparaging comments to subordinates. She doesn't like the possibility that the boss is to blame for my toothache. Near my office, in a 27-story mixed-use building, was the dentist's office on the 3rd floor. I planned to eat dinner in the basement food court after completing my checkup shortly after 7:30 p.m. and waiting for the elevator. Unusually, when the descending elevator arrived, nobody else was there. "Is the 1st floor okay for you?" The response to my request to see the basement floor was a straightforward yes. She most likely works for a business that occupies this structure. It was not the first time we had used the elevator together. She is incredibly beautiful. I mean, absolutely amazing. The open button allowing everyone to get on and off is always held by her at the control panel, and she rapidly presses the close button before leaving. I had given her the nickname Elevator Lady in private, and I always looked forward to seeing her in the elevator. However, I never thought I would see her again after seeing the dentist and spend some time with her alone. I found myself wishing the elevator would just stop for some reason when suddenly I felt a strong jolt from below. It's an earthquake. The elevator actually stopped. The lights went out and the emergency lights turned on at the same time. My right arm was suddenly yanked tight. She, in her shock, had grabbed onto my bicep with both her hands. I was frozen, unable to move, just standing there. It felt like a long time, but in reality, it was only a few seconds, maybe several. Then the elevator began moving again, stopping at the nearest floor, and the doors opened. "It's okay now. Let's get out." She quickly let go of my arm. Then, blushing, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and gave a nod. We both exited the elevator side by side. She nodded again and began to walk away. "Excuse me," before I could think, I had called out to her. She stopped and looked back at me. I said, If you'd like, maybe we could grab a meal together." She looked puzzled and tilted her head. "You know, since we both got scared. But I guess that's a bit forward, isn't it?" I felt like I was about to burst into flames. I've never tried picking up anyone before. "Do you think the restaurants are still open after that quake?" And so we headed to the underground food court. The places were still operating as usual. Wanting to impress, I chose an upscale-looking sushi restaurant. "I'm sorry about earlier," Hut said. "For what?" "For grabbing onto your arm." "Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal," I replied. She continued a little shyly with a smile on her face. "It's been a while since I did that. I used to do it all the time as a kid. I would just cling on to anyone without thinking. But when I was 6 or 7, I got separated from my parents at a fair. I thought I was holding onto my dad's pants in the crowd, but it turned out to be a stranger. So you got lost because of that? I asked. Yes, it was a college-aged guy. He took me to a lost children's area and stayed with me until my parents came. I clung to his arm the whole time. I started to say, "You must have been." But I caught my words, hinting that she must have been adorable. My dad scolded me a lot afterward, she continued. He said grabbing people's arms like that is a sign of being spoiled. Don't rely on others. Stand on your own 2 feet, he told me. And that's when I tried to break the habit of clinging to people. So was today the first time since then? I asked, curious. Who knows? She playfully responded. But anyway, I'm glad I wasn't alone. She smiled warmly. After that, the conversation drifted to a recent visit to the dentist because of a toothache that wasn't the cavity. We also talked about our work, must definitely be because of our bosses. Before I realized it, I was talking more than I usually did. It's not just my current boss. Ever since I was born, there's always been a woman in a position above me. My sisters are 5 and 3 years older than me. Throughout elementary, middle, and high school, all my teachers were women. Even at my part-time jobs, all my bosses have been women. Are you afraid of women or something? No, I don't see it that way. It's just that. Just what? Back in my school days, I had this female friend. She'd often invite me out to drink and stuff. I'd get my hopes up, thinking something might happen, but in the end, she'd say something like, "You are just a safe bet to me." She listened to my light-hearted story with a smile on her face. Every once in a while, she'd brush her hair behind her ear with her right hand. I noticed a small mole on the back of her hand, right around where the base of her thumb is. Are you sure you're okay with it? She had suggested splitting the bill, but I declined, saying, I was the one who invited you. We had forgotten to even exchange names. I couldn't tell her that I'd seen her around before. Thank you so much for today and for treating me to dinner. No problem. Thank you too. She walked toward the train station, looking back at me and waving 2 or 3 times. Each time, I wanted to call out to her. I wanted to stop her and exchange contact details, but I thought maybe I'd be bothering her or she might reject me. With those thoughts, I couldn't muster the courage to speak up. Waving back was all I could manage. Anyway, I'll see her again in the elevator like always. I reassured myself internally. As I watched her leave, I realized I was clenching my teeth. Simultaneously, the words of my dentist echoed in my mind. Be conscious not to clench your teeth. From then on, with a strong desire to meet her again, I'd find reasons to slip out of work and head to that building next to our office. But for some reason, I never bumped into her in the elevator again. Then one day, "Hey, Robert," while I was working on an urgent task at my desk, I was called by the laid-back voice of Amy. When I reached her office, she handed me a notice of my job reassignment. You're being transferred to our subsidiary. Look, it's that underperforming company. Being sent to such a low-level company, I really feel for you. But maybe it's just right for someone like you. Anyway, use that little brain of yours and make sure the handover is smooth. My successor was a man from the department next to mine. Newly hired, mid-career, when the handover process began, he was quick to grasp things and had a pleasant demeanor. He was also fairly well received by our clients. My only concern was that he seemed a bit timid. 2 weeks later, I started at the subsidiary. The commute took about 20 minutes longer than before, but it was manageable. However, because I was unfamiliar with the train line, I barely made it on time that day. Panting, I rushed into the building's elevator. Our office was on the 7th floor. As I reached to press the elevator button for the 7th floor, I noticed the light for that floor was already lit. Go into the 7th floor. I was addressed by a woman standing in front of the control panel. I replied with a nod and looked up at her. What? Why? It was her. The woman from that night of the earthquake. It was a small building. Each floor was occupied by just one company. I've been working for the company on this floor for about a month now. Oh, really? Are you Robert by any chance? Yes. I had heard someone was being sent here from the parent company. I finally understood the situation from what she said. For a moment, I was taken aback. Could such a coincidence really happen? I'm Emily, the head of Sales Division 1, Team 3 at your new assignment. Unbelievable. She was my new boss. I later found out that the company I was transferred to had business dealings with the company she had worked for until a month ago. Her previous company was a small one, just a tad bigger than a sole proprietorship. The owner of that company had gotten old and decided to shut it down, so my new company recognized her talents and recruited her. After the elevator reached the 7th floor, she pressed the close button and motioned for me to exit first. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I caught her giving me a warm smile. Thus began my new chapter in life, but our relationship remained strictly professional. Then one day, she uncharacteristically raised her voice on the phone, saying things like, "That's why it's impossible. At the very least, you need to go through a charter before handing up." I'd approached her with some documents I needed to submit and asked, "Is everything okay?" "No, it's nothing major. I'm sorry for raising my voice." She was clearly flustered. I was curious, but I didn't press for the details and left her office. At that moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a call from a colleague in my old department. I stepped out into the hallway to answer. "Yes, this is Rob." Hey, we've got a situation here." Despite saying it was serious, that voice sounded oddly amused. "Weren't you having a phone dispute over there just now?" Yeah, kind of. The bee called that guy Jack. He up and quit the company. Jack was my successor, and I was concerned about his timid nature. So the boss lady is fuming, yelling, "What's going on? How can he be so irresponsible? Doesn't anyone know? Guess it's your fault, huh?" It was the first I'd heard that Jack had become the boss's target. He took over right from me. I genuinely felt bad for him, but as I was wondering why the boss had called in the first place, my former colleague explained. "Since he left so suddenly, we don't have anyone to fill this spot. They tried to bring you back here for the time being, but you turned them down flat. Amy is steaming mad right now." It all clicked, and I went back into the room. Our eyes met. I felt the need to thank her and gave a nod of appreciation. It didn't take me long to adjust to the new workplace, perhaps due to the absence of the previous stressors. Even my toothaches ceased to bother me. Most importantly, work became fun. Of course, seeing Emily at work was a highlight, and she truly was a catch. Always efficient at her job and providing clear instructions to us, her subordinates. Yet, she never acted arrogant, a stark contrast to that bossy lady back at my old place. The vulnerable image I had of her from that night of the earthquake was nowhere to be found. My secret feelings for her only grew, but I thought they were just unattainable dreams. However, oh my, wallet. On my way home from work and about to hop on the subway, I realized I forgot my wallet at the office. In a rush, I headed back to the company to find Emily there alone, elbows on the desk, and her head cradled in her hands. "You're still here?" I asked. "Oh yeah, just lost in thought," she replied. "What brings you back?" "Robert left my wallet," I said. "I see." I grabbed my forgotten wallet from the drawer and asked her if she was leaving soon. Maybe I should wait up. "Let's head out together." With that, the two of us got in the elevator. "I hope it doesn't get stuck again," she murmured, looking up at the elevator's floor indicator. When I turned to her, she was already looking at me. "Is it okay?" I wasn't sure what she meant by okay. The next moment, she suddenly gripped my arm tightly, much like that night of the earthquake. But this time, even after we stepped out of the elevator and began walking, she didn't let go of my arm. My previous company was a small place. I was persuaded to join this one, but being a manager and leading people, it's quite a challenge. It seems that even she, who always appears confident at work, feels the pressure. How about grabbing some dinner? I suggested. I was thinking the same, but I have two conditions. Suddenly, she let go of my arm and took on a serious demeanor, just like at work. What are they? We'll split the bill. Okay. No sushi places. Got it. She shrugged and let out a soft chuckle. Actually, I'm not a fan of raw fish, she added. So you pushed yourself that other night? I asked. Yes, I thought. Why not? You treated me after all. We both laughed heartily. As we laughed, she grabbed my arm again, resting her head on my shoulder. She chose a barbecue place near the station. A man and a woman, just the two of us, at a barbecue joint. My heart raced, but she seemed completely unbothered. First, we toasted with draft beers. I glanced at her right hand as she held her mug. I was staring at a mole near the base of her thumb on the back of her hand. What? She noticed where I was looking and seemed puzzled. Oh, that mole on your hand. Yeah, I've been self-conscious about it before. What about the mole? I asked. Well, actually, me too, I said, showing her the palm of my left hand. Look, right here. Oh my, she said. On the palm of my left hand, I also had a mole near the base of my thumb. She laid her right hand over my extended left one. It's a perfect match, almost the same spot, she said, playfully looking at our overlapping hands. Matching the lines of our palms. It's like fate or something. She made a cheeky face, sticking out her tongue. And so we began dating. Of course, we never mixed our personal and professional lives. However, our colleagues seemed to have had an inkling about us. Then, about a year and a half later, an unexpected announcement was made. Firstly, the head of the department I was previously in, Manager Williams, was removed from her position. The HR department, concerned about the high turnover rate of employees under her direct supervision, conducted interviews and found out about Amy's arrogant behavior. She was removed from her director position and relegated to a less significant role. Then Emily was chosen as her successor, transferring from a subsidiary. It was truly a promotion for her. I was chosen to fill Emily's previous role. From tomorrow, we'll be in different departments at work, she said. We can't help it. Anyway, let's pick up from where we left off the other day. Here now, why not? She smiled mischievously. I couldn't suppress the bubbling feelings anymore. Once she sets her mind on something, she won't listen. She took the coffee cup from my hand. I extended my now empty left hand towards her. She placed her right hand over mine. Our palm lines match. It's like fate, I said, just as the toaster dinged. That's it for now. The toast is ready, she said. Darn. She and I took turns cooking that day. It was my turn to prepare breakfast, so I was in the kitchen. We had started living together, by the way. The reason we were moved to separate departments is that it's the company's policy that married couples can't be in the same department. Yes, we were newlyweds, fresh into our marriage. Let's continue from where we left off, she said, calling my attention. My beloved Emily was repeatedly trying to get my attention. Naturally, I presented the palm of my left hand in front of her. Then Emily playfully slapped it away. What's the matter? Still half asleep. It was Emily's voice that made me realize I had dozed off and had been dreaming of our newlywed days. The sensation of Emily's hand tapping mine brought me back to reality. About the other day, I mumbled, and Emily picked up on it. She gently placed her right hand over my left. Look at us. We've changed, haven't we? She looked at her hand with wrinkles and smiled. We've been married for almost 20 years now. Oh, found another gray hair. she said, continuing. Saying that, she began plucking out my gray hairs. It had been just 3 days since she found the first gray hairs.